We all have those days, right? Or even tough weeks, moments that really push us to our limits. That's part of being human. But how do you know when those everyday struggles are maybe pointing to something a little deeper, something that really needs your attention?
And that really brings us to the big question we're digging into here. How can we actually tell the difference? How do we know if we're just in a funk? Or if we're seeing the first real signs of a psychological problem that, well, that could get a lot better with the right kind of help? Let's figure that out together.
All right, so here's our game plan. We're going to walk through 5 key areas that can show us what's really going on. We'll start inside with our inner world, then see how that stuff starts showing up in our actions and relationships. We'll talk about pain that just won't go away, and, this is the most important part, we'll talk about the very first step to actually feeling better. First up, let's look at the signs happening in our inner world. Now, these are the ones that are so tricky because they're often totally invisible to everyone else. They happen right between our own 2 ears, in our thoughts and in our feelings.
Okay, so a psychologically healthy person has, a basic foundation of self-worth. Of course, we all have moments where we doubt ourselves. That's normal. But what we're talking about here is something else entirely. It's a chronic, long-term state. If you've been feeling this deep, nagging hatred or disgust for yourself for a really long time, this feeling of being worthless, that is a major, major sign.
Here's another internal sign. Fear just takes over everything. In a healthy mind, you've got your hopes and your fears, and they're kind of balanced. But when things go wrong, you might have all these dreams and goals, but you are so paralyzed by fear that you literally can't take a single step towards them. It's like you're trapped behind this invisible fence of your own anxiety, just stuck in a loop of being unhappy. So, that's what's happening inside. But that internal turmoil, it doesn't stay locked up in your head forever. Eventually, it starts to spill out and show up in your actions, especially in the ways you try to dodge your own pain. Yeah, when facing our problems just feels like too much, we all find ways to avoid them. Some of these might even seem kind of harmless, like just sleeping all the time to escape reality. Others might turn to food for comfort, or more seriously to alcohol or drugs to try and numb everything. And hey, even things like shopping compulsively or burying yourself in work can just be another way of running from something you really don't want to face.
And this leads to a really powerful way to think about addiction. It isn't just about substances. A great way to define it is our insistence on keeping something in our lives even when we know it's hurting us. I mean, think about it. A toxic job you can't quit, a friendship that drains you, or a relationship that just causes you constant pain, but for some reason you feel like you just can't let go.
So far, we've been looking inward. Now, let's zoom out and see how our inner state starts to affect the world around us, our relationships, our daily routines. These are the signs that can really start to tear apart the very fabric of our lives.
We're all creatures of habit, right? We have a pretty typical appetite, a general sleep pattern, a way we like to socialize. Well, a huge red flag is when those basic fundamental routines get completely flipped upside down. Someone who barely eats might suddenly be overeating all the time, or the opposite. A person who loves to sleep in might find themselves wide awake staring at the ceiling all night, every night. It's a sign that the basic balances are off. And that distress, it also starts to wreck our ability to just function in the world. You might find you're arguing with everybody, and you feel totally and completely alone. Your grades or your work performance just tanks because you can't focus. Or maybe you're stuck in a relationship that's just a constant battle, a source of nonstop tension that just sucks all the energy out of you.
Sometimes the people who really care about us see the change long before we're ready to admit it ourselves. If your friends or family, the people you trust, who you know have your back, start saying things like, "Hey, you don't seem like yourself lately," or "I'm really worried about you," it's probably a good idea to listen. They might be seeing the signs from the outside that you just can't see from the inside.
Okay, this fourth area is so important. It's about pain that just doesn't change. Look, life is going to throw loss and failure at every single one of us. A key sign of mental health is our ability to process that pain and eventually move forward. But what happens when those wounds just refuse to heal?
Healthy people grieve. They feel pain, but eventually our natural ability to adapt kicks in and lets us continue with life. But when there's an underlying psychological issue, that adaptation process just fails. It could be years after a breakup or a death or a major failure, but the pain feels just as raw as it did on day one. You feel stuck in that moment, completely unable to move on. And that feeling often leads to this deep, profound sense of being alone. It's like you're stuck inside a dark box, looking out through a little window at the rest of the world, where everyone else seems to have figured out how to be happy. You can't understand it, and it just makes you feel even more isolated and broken.
Here's another one. Your brain grabs onto a tiny little fear and just blows it up into a massive crisis. Maybe it's a fear of getting sick or of germs, and even when everyone around you is telling you that you're overreacting, you just can't let it go. That anxiety gets so big that it messes with your sleep, your relationships, your whole ability to just live your life. All right, let's talk about the most important part of all of this, the first step toward healing. It's one thing to recognize these signs, but if they're sounding really familiar, if they've been sticking around for a while and maybe even getting worse, what do you actually do next? This is about moving from just seeing the signs to taking action.
So many of us think we should be able to just power through these things with willpower. But from moderate to severe psychological problems, that's almost never possible. Trying to fix it yourself is like trying to set your own broken leg. You need a professional. You need support.
And there is absolutely zero shame in that. The treatments we have today are incredibly effective. Now, therapy by itself can work, and medication by itself can work, but what the research shows us over and over is that for many conditions, the combination of both is the most effective solution. Therapy helps you change the patterns, and medication can help fix the brain chemistry that makes those changes possible in the first place.
So where do you start? What's the first step? It's actually really straightforward. Schedule a psychiatric evaluation. A professional can give you a real diagnosis and help guide you toward the right treatment for you. They'll lay out the options and get you started on the right path. You don't have to figure this out on your own.
It takes real courage to even admit these things to yourself, but so many people let years of their lives slip by living in this kind of pain. You don't have to endure it. So the last question I want to leave you with is a simple one. What are you waiting for to feel better? That journey can start right now.